Welcome to the Leaders Agenda, a podcast series dedicated to reimagining leadership within life sciences. My name is Tarja Huuskonen, and I'm your host as well as the CEO of Action for Results. I've had the opportunity to work with leaders all over the world, building new capabilities for innovation. The Leaders Agenda podcast invites insights and perspectives from some of the very best leaders of our time. Wisdom that you too can build into your own Leaders Agenda. My guests today are Beth Mccombs, the Chief Technology Officer of Becton & Dickinson, BD, and Kate Cronin, the Chief Brand Officer of Moderna. Both ladies have been recognized this year as key influencers in the world of healthcare. Beth was in the top 100 women leaders in healthcare list, and BR Week's 30 lineup health influencer list included Kate. Our conversation today touches on their careers, of course, what they've learned in the course of their career paths, what we can learn from them, not just in terms of how we shape our own careers and jobs, but about leadership, about culture, about growth mindset. I hope that you will enjoy this conversation. So Beth Mccombs and Kate Cronin, welcome to the Leaders Agenda podcast. I'm so excited to have both of you. Good morning.
Morning, thank you.
And of course, it's not morning anymore where you are. I'm in California, so let's check where the two of you are. Beth, you are calling in from New Jersey, is that right?
That's right. Franklin Lakes, New Jersey is BD headquarters.
BD headquarters there, and we're going to come back to asking what you do at the BD headquarters. And Kate, you are, I believe, still in Chicago, right?
I'm in Armonk in New York, so outside of New York City.
So you are at the moment in the same time zone, and I'm here in California. So it's really delightful to have both of you here. And particularly, I'm into exploring remarkable women in life sciences. And the two of you, of course, are on the top of the list in many, many ways. So what I'd like to do is, before we get started, is ask each of you to just introduce a little bit about yourself and even tell us a little more about the companies. And then we'll go from there. So may I ask Beth to start first?
Sure, happy to. I'm Beth Mccombs. I am the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at BD. BD is a global medical technology company, and we have a very broad portfolio from doing discovery of new drugs and providing instruments and reagents to help researchers discover new vaccines and medicines. We also have a diagnostic portfolio primarily focused on infectious disease. And then we also are very involved with delivery of medications and interventional treatments to treat different chronic disease conditions across the board. So I about 23 years in the medical device industry. I'm an engineer by training and have generally been in the research and development area for most of my career, although I've deviated a little bit into business development and strategic marketing, really all around innovation, which is my big passion and sense of purpose.
Excellent. Thank you. And how about you, Kate?
So I am the Chief Brand Officer at Moderna, and I've been at Moderna, this is my 4th month. And so I spent the bulk of my career working at agencies. And most recently, I was the CEO of Ogilvy Health. I was at Ogilvy Health for 17 years. So spent a significant time in marketing, advertising, and PR. And happy to be at Moderna, known as the company with the COVID vaccine, one of the companies with the COVID vaccine. But we also really focus on mRNA as a platform. We look at our company as a health technology company, not a pharma company, and focusing on the promise of messenger RNA. And we already know what the promise has been for COVID, but we also believe that mRNA technology can be applied across a number of different diseases and categories. So we're excited about the future of mRNA. We're happy to be here today.
Very interesting. Thank you. So if I just summarize the two company backgrounds, first of all, we have Becton & Dickinson, I think was founded 1897. It's got 70,000 some people globally and a lot of diversity in terms of its product portfolio. And now we have Moderna, and I think Moderna was founded 2010. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, and is it true that this current vaccine is it Moderna's first
Yes, it's
full product release?
yes,
So
it's
we
our
went
first
from
product. Yeah.
0 products to blockbuster, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Okay.
quite a ride in 18 months. The company was not ready to go commercial as quickly as we did. We started off with, for 10 years, just a few hundred employees, and overnight, basically, now we have 2,400 employees. So it was quite a Herculean lift to be able to do something like this.
So we should have a very interesting conversation here. I think both in terms of your backgrounds. Beth, you are a mechanical engineer by education, I think. And then did I find someplace in my notes that you may have a neurobiology background, not just communications background, Kate?
Yes, yeah, I did neurobiology when I graduated from college. I was an electron microscopist, and I studied the rat hippocampus at Cornell, and did that for a couple of years before I moved into public relations and healthcare communications. So a very small stint doing research.
Yeah, very good. Okay, and the reason why these backgrounds are very interesting for our listeners is that I think that there are several listeners for this podcast that are wondering, how do you actually make a career path all the way to types of positions that the two of you are holding right now? So before we get to that journey, I have to ask a very basic question, and that is, what does a chief technology officer do?
Overall, I'm responsible for end-to-end research and development for the organization. So really putting together first, the innovation portfolio and identifying the needs of our customers, and then pulling that all the way through new product development to commercialization, and then of course being responsible for the technical product through the full life cycle management, of that. We do a lot also looking at external innovation and doing technical diligence on new opportunities that we would want to bring into the BD family. So really everything innovation, new products that are driving growth for the company.
Okay, and Chief Branding Officer.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure we all are clear what a chief branding officer does either. So
it's somewhere, it's sort of somewhere between chief communications officer and chief marketing officer. And basically chief brand officer, in my role, I run all communications for the company. I'm also responsible for the look and feel and the narrative of the Moderna brand. So I like to say I'm the chief storyteller, and telling the story of Moderna. And that's really what I look at as a chief brand officer. And that includes, again, visual identity, the look and feel, and then of course, content, and how we push content out and how we create engagement and experiences with our stakeholders.
And how important is it as a chief brand officer to be, I mean, if you were working in the same company, would you be working closely with one another based on what each of you do?
So oftentimes technology is really what drives our insights and drives our ability to communicate effectively across all of our stakeholders. So I would say 100% we work closely together.
I agree. We don't have a chief brand officer, but I do work very closely with our head of communications and our head of marketing. Certainly marketing and R&D and medical need to be connected at the hip very early on to understand the needs and the opportunities, and then making sure that the product is meeting those needs through the full life cycle. And then from a communications, really sharing the stories of our innovation and making sure that our customers and potential external talent and our investors are all aware, of that innovation. So I agree that we certainly need to be very aligned and a team together to drive innovation.
Now, you both talk about storytelling. You just said we need to make sure we're sharing our stories. You said you're a chief storyteller. Is there, just from a leadership perspective, not necessarily from a branding perspective, is there a method to the madness as we think about leadership as part of being really always a storyteller? How do we get a large company or a smaller company all to have a common story?
Mm-hmm. Here at BD and at other companies I've been a part of, it all starts with the purpose And at BD, our purpose is advancing the world of health. And so that really permeates the culture, and everything we do is having that mindset of how we're advancing health. We also, over the last couple of years, have developed what we call the BD Way, which is our shared values. That's really being clear about what we stand for, doing the right thing, being accountable, helping each other be great, just some examples. And then, from that foundation of purpose and culture, then, certainly having a clear strategy and being able to articulate, where we're going as a company, the areas we're planning to innovate and serve customers, and just sharing that very, regularly, with the company, and helping each individual tie that overall strategy and purpose, to the work that he or she does every day.
And I would add to that, it's so important that we're sharing our narrative internally. I like to look at the employees as kind of our chief evangelists in terms of getting our story out there and making sure that they understand what we're doing, what makes us different, what makes us unique, which is where technology comes to play. So when we launch something, whether it be a new indication or a new study, we want to make sure that employees can access that information effectively and efficiently. And so kind of our intranet resource, how we put our information together for employees is super important, so they can find things that they're looking for. And I think that's part of the problem is, how do you find the information?
So we're going to go back in time a little bit. You currently hold amazing positions. I was just reading a recent study saying that within life sciences, I think it was the top 100 medical device companies, only about 21% of the most senior executive positions are held by women. Thinking back in your own career, did you deliberately set out a career path for yourselves, or did it just kind of evolve? And if so, how did you make choices along the way and end up where you are today?
Sure, I can start. I would say it was more of an evolution than a master plan. And, it started, very early on. I was interested in the sciences and math. My father's an engineer. My mother's a nurse. And so as I thought about my career, biomedical engineering was a very natural, combination, of the two. And I just feel fortunate I've spent the last 20 plus years being able to have that privilege to serve healthcare and to serve patients. So I think I've had that benefit of knowing what I wanted to do in a general way. And then it was really just a stepwise taking, new responsibilities, new challenges, and kind of learning and growing, getting outside my comfort zone, that I think helped, evolve to where I am today. So no grand master plan, but I think just being open to the possibilities and always learning and being willing to take on new risks and responsibilities.
Yeah, I would add to that, Beth. My father was an engineer also. He was a career Army engineer. My mother was a teacher. And actually growing up, I loved science and math, and my father was always the one to help me with my homework. So I thought I was going to be pre-med. I was pre-med when I was in college. And then I took a little bit of a break and said, maybe I don't want to be a doctor after all. I love science, but I don't know what I want to do with it. So that's when I tried research for a couple of years. And again, that was a moment where I said, in 2 years, my boss, who was the head of the lab, basically let me author 4 papers with her. And I thought I could just be writing papers for the rest of my life and never really understand how the rat hippocampus works. So I thought, what else can I do? And I landed in a job at doing health PR, and I fell in love with it because you could learn the science of new drugs, new research, and learn it and get excited about it and then communicate about it. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I enjoyed doing that, and I stayed with it because I was never lured by anything else. What happened over the course of my career is same with you. It sort of just kept growing in terms of expanding beyond PR and then doing advertising. When I first worked on my first DTC campaign, I thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but you know what? Get uncomfortable. I like what you said, Beth, about getting uncomfortable and, learning. That's how you learn and that's how you grow. And so it's been an evolution for me as well. And, I think sometimes that's the best way to grow your career is you explore and you find things, which is great.
Is there a moment in time for either one of you where you consciously said, I'm going to take a big risk? but I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, Moderna.
That's a recent risk. Okay.
No, I'm kidding. It's not a risk. I mean, well, and joking aside, I was super comfortable at Ogilvy. I was the CEO of Ogilvy Health. I thought I had my dream job, and it was my dream job, but I consider myself incredibly lucky because I now have another dream job. And who gets two dream jobs in 1 year? But that was a risk to walk away from all the equity that I built within Ogilvy over 17 years and to start something completely new where I was going to work on the client side. I had never worked on the client side. I'd only been agency side. And moving my family, my kids are older, but moving from my house that I built with my husband and picking up roots and moving to Boston is all a risk, but one that I welcome because, to the point made earlier, getting uncomfortable is the way you grow, and I'm not done growing in my career yet. So
definitely, I'd say one of my bigger risks was getting outside my comfort zone of R&D. So I had been, in different parts of R&D, kind of moving up in responsibility for about 15 years of my career. And then there was a commercial leader who offered me the opportunity to lead new growth platforms for a surgical business. And I was responsible for strategic marketing. So it gave me a lot more appreciation for my strategic marketing counterparts, that these models don't just come out of thin air, a lot of, hard work and insights, and also getting into more business development and negotiating, deals. And so it was outside of my comfort zone, but still very much in the innovation realm. And so I think having that one foot that's on solid ground, for me in the innovation space, but then having one foot on the ice that's more, in the marketing and commercial and business development realm, is kind of a good place to be versus going, too far out where you might be, kind of a little in over your head. So, but that certainly was a risk. And then I ended up coming back to R&D. And but I really think that was an enriching experience that built my business acumen. And now in my role today, when I'm involved with more external innovations and deal making, I have a better sense of how to help lead those discussions.
And that's an interesting observation also, given that I think the world of innovation has changed dramatically from what it was even 10, 15 years ago in life sciences. It was much more within the four walls of an organization. We do a lot more partnering these days. There's a lot more focus on patient centricity and really engaging with patients in a very different way. And inside the organization, cross-functionality rules. I think there's a big recognition that the vertical hierarchies aren't going to bring the best products out the door, and we need to be able to work in a very different way. How has that cross-functionality internally changed your view on leadership?
I think leadership is also building how to build a cohesive team and recognizing not everything is in your remit. And how do you bring together all the right parties with a cross-functional approach and lead that team where these folks don't all report into you, but ultimately you may be the executive sponsor of an initiative that requires a lot of different moving parts and folks to engage. And it's funny that you bring this up, Tarja, because literally just today I had 2 calls where I said, we really need to create a cross-functional team on this because this team alone isn't going to be able to handle it, and that team alone. And what was happening is I saw parallel paths and a little bit of redundancy because everyone was trying to solve for the same problem. So I think in that helps define leadership as being able to bring those parties together effectively to come up with solutions where the right people are around the table.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kate. And, I think if I think about cross-functional teamwork, I think that's not a new concept. Cross-functional teams have been the key ingredient for success through my entire career in having the right diverse capabilities around the table. What I think is different is just the pace of change and the pace of innovation is, increasing, accelerating. And that means that we need to have a more agile way of tapping into the right expertise at the right time and making sure the right voices are heard. So, I can't top down know all of those answers. So how do I invite the voices to be able to come quickly and kind of voice those perspectives so that we can take action. So I think it's really about the empowerment, like agile team methodology, I think works very well in software. How do we adapt that more broadly, having the stand-up meetings and backlogs for people to grab what needs to happen. So that's what I see as more the pace and the agility, but still the foundation of a strong cross-functional team built on trust and a common shared purpose is one of the fundamentals of innovation.
So let's talk
Absolutely.
about that in context of the pandemic specifically, because I think both of your companies stepped to the limelight very quickly, and you have delivered incredibly. So you did something right, clearly, internally, to be able to get products out the door quickly and continuing to. Was there a special thing, something that allowed that to happen under unusual circumstances, under a crazy deadline, under public pressure, all this, that, and everything else, but also knowing that people were virtual and they were just as much at risk of COVID as everybody else? How did you do it?
It was just a clear need from the world, that we needed to deliver. For example, with our COVID testing, both PCR as well as rapid antigen testing. One of our world record developments was we were able to start to finish in 14 weeks, deliver our Veritor, rapid antigen test. And the secret to success there was clear sense of purpose, and that the team had whatever the resources the company had at their disposal at the team's disposal, to deliver. And so we really, with that clear sense of purpose, with a strong sponsor team, provided all the resources. And when there were setbacks, we, rather than pointing fingers, really pulled together and figured out, the supply chain. I'm sure, Kate, you had similar challenges in Moderna, ramping up the supply chain very quickly. It was, all hands on deck to work together and to figure that out when the world needed it most. Similarly, ramping up our syringe output. We have now had over 2 billion syringes that have been ordered to support the pandemic, and working with our operations team and providing the right technical support to do that as well. So I think when there's a clear sense of purpose and a strong team that's capable, that you can really move mountains. And we're now applying those lessons and the need for focus to our broader portfolio. So we're looking at some of the maybe lower value programs where we maybe are spreading our resources too thin, and stopping those and putting more effort and focus on the things that we think are going to have the greatest impact on healthcare. So that's a lesson we've pulled from the pandemic, because we've realized how fast we can move when we need to.
That's and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just going to ask you, how do we replicate that sense of purpose and also focus, and being able to really deal with the obstacles in an effective way, which I consider also part of the leader's agenda. So if we have these teams executing, part of the leader's job is to make sure that they have what is needed to be successful. So you saying in your company, you're really very consciously taking some of those lessons and looking at how do you integrate those into day to day.
Right, exactly.
And
I would echo what Beth said in terms of sense of purpose. I think that is, my CEO Stefan Bensel says, patients are waiting, and so there was an urgency around getting the vaccines produced. And as you know, it was done in a record time in terms of developing a vaccine. Because of the mRNA technology, the way it works, we were able to have the sequence for the vaccine in 48 hours. And then from there, the supply chain was really, we only had one factory. Ramping up significantly required a huge effort, and people were working every day, weekends, 24/7, producing vaccine for the world. And I think what we similar to Beth, taking that, and what we thought is we need to bottle that, because that made us very successful. And how do you bottle that? So we reflected back on what were the mindsets that allowed us to be so successful. And those mindsets are what we then captured, and now we have rolled them out to all of our employees to say, these are our Moderna mindsets. And that includes like things like, acting with agility, removing viscosity, act like an owner. So making those decisions that you think an owner would make of a business, running tracks in parallel. So optionality. So one of these things may not work and you have to be ready to quickly pivot and do one versus the other, but you start them both. Bottling those mindsets is how we are moving forward, so that people remember it wasn't just during a pandemic that you need to behave this way. This is something that makes this company successful and how we should behave going forward across all of our therapeutic areas.
Now you both talk about agility, taking ownership, making decisions, and sometimes those decisions may be incorrect decisions. So we take risk, take personal risk also in that context. How does that translate to your job as senior leaders as it relates to setting the culture of the company such that it becomes safe to do that, even when it might mean that it doesn't work quite the way that I planned every time? How does the team feel comfortable?
Well, Tarja, it's funny that you say that, because actually our number one or number two mindset is we accept risk. And we have talked about this with all of our employees, because what's happened is we're bringing in a lot of new people who come from pharmaceutical companies and perhaps more conservative companies, where they may edit things out thinking, well, there's no way we could ever do that. And we accept risk as a mindset at Moderna, which means it's not dangerous risk, but risk. So if we like to say, when we fail fast and we move on. It's better to take on some risk and offer up that innovative thinking versus staying conservative and in the box, because that's not what made Moderna what it is. That's not at all what Moderna was, never in that box.
And you're saying to help people internalize that.
Correct.
To be sometimes almost a one-on-one conversation with
because people edit themselves, right? If you're in a meeting, you're like, I'm not going to recommend that idea because my previous company would have never done that. But we want you to think, you know what, bring up the idea and let's try it. And if it's a risk, it doesn't work, we quickly move on and learn from that. We learn from the risk and then we move on. And when I'm again in marketing and advertising, I can't tell you how many pitches I went on to pharmaceutical companies, and I would pitch an idea, and the first, which I thought would be an innovative, cool idea, and the first question they would ask is, have you ever done this before? And if the answer is no, well, they wouldn't buy that idea because nobody wanted to be the guinea pig. The great thing about Moderna is my boss will say, have you ever done this before? And I say no. And he's like, great, let's see what we can do. Like, geez, let's do it, And that's, for a marketer, that's incredible. That's like catnip. It's like, oh, wait, we can do a cool big idea. Wow. But then you have to pivot quickly. If it's not working, it's on me. And then I have to be able to say, we learned from it, we're moving to the next idea, and et cetera. So.
Got it. What's worked for you, Beth?
You mentioned earlier, BD is over 100 years old, and we on an annual basis supply 45 billion products. So we have to be reliable, and it's a very performance-oriented culture in order to deliver that backbone of healthcare products. And also, you mentioned it's a 70,000 employee company, so there's a lot of people and management layers focusing in two areas. And you would hear our CEO Tom Poland say the same thing. One is about speak up culture and really encouraging that psychological safety and kind of as a leader, how we respond to bad news, or how we respond to someone saying, I don't have all the answers yet, but there's a risk that I'm aware of, and not expecting that perfect buttoned up answer. So I think having the leaders create that culture where speak up is safe and your voice is taken seriously and we take action is so important, especially in innovation. We need to hear that early on so that we can pull it through and address it first. I mean, the risk is going to realize potentially sooner rather than later. We want to address it. And I'd say the other part is growth mindset. It has been a big focus for us of how do we actually look at the progress that we're making. And if we're not perfect today, that's okay. But where were we and where do we want to be, in the future, and really monitoring our progress and how we can, improve and learn from, failures. So those have been very explicit areas that we focused as a leadership team to overcome some of the challenges of being a larger company that could filter some of those signals that we need to hear earlier.
Since you bring up that growth mindset, I have to ask then, how does that play out for the two of you? And specifically, if you're comfortable, if there was actually a time in your career where it was a significant failure and there was a learning from that, I'd love to hear how you've integrated that into your own path.
For me, one of the big areas of growth was when I transitioned from being a leader of a core team to more of an organizational leader, and I led more from a place of technical, expertise, and I would collaborate within a team, but really figuring out how to tap in more to my heart and my purpose, and to be able to communicate that. And I think we've maybe all had different executive presence, trainings, but as an engineer, sometimes that's a little out of your comfort zone. And I'd say the way I really found my footing there was a mentor of mine, just in a very simple way said, Beth, just be yourself, and be confident in yourself, and talk to people just the way that you talk to me. But share that passion and that energy, and as well as your technical expertise, because that's all part of who you are and what's going to make people want to follow you. So I was able to kind of, instead of trying to worry about, am I acting like this leader or that leader that I admire, figuring out who is the leader that I want to be. And that really helped me kind of step into some of those bigger roles.
And do you still have a mentor?
Yes, I have, I would say, sponsors that, have been along with me through my career that I speak with. I use mentors kind of more episodic when there's something that I need to learn or understand. But I certainly have, sponsors who've, in a more longitudinal way, kind of helped me, and I still, seek, for advice.
Very good. How about you, Kate?
I think there's a couple key growth learnings for me. One is definitely around kind of where Beth was going with this idea of, you at one point in your career, you do your job and you're really good at it, and then you get promoted into this bigger job where it's no longer about how good you do your job. It's about how you communicate and how you bring others along. And so that was, kind of a learning, is the importance of communication, even though that's my business. So you think I know it, but I don't think I realized at the time how important that was, because you have to put just as much effort in that, in bringing others along, and also hearing from them, so you can pivot kind of your leadership style or whatever it is you're working on, so that people are saying, I want to hear more about this or that or whatever it may be. So that was a learning. And then also, this idea of failing fast, which I think is super important. So if you make a wrong hire and that happens, digging your heels in and trying to make it work, or, putting them in a different role. Like when in your gut it's not going to work out, you have to make the call, even if it's like a new client relationship or whatever it may be. It's go with the gut and make the call.
Right. I think oftentimes in companies, when we promote people, we give them a title and we kind of expect that somehow they're ready. They just show up the next day in this new title and they've got everything it takes to be successful. And you both are kind of speaking to the need for really reflect what's different and think about not just only from a skill side, but also how you approach your job. So if you were to look at sort of the percentage of time today that goes to different things, what's in a day of a chief brand officer or chief technology officer? So what would my pie chart look like for percentages of time that may be more technical, detailed, maybe more people oriented, maybe for a customer? How do you divide your time?
That's a tough one. I could take a stab at it. Maybe 40% dealing with my team. And I have a very small team, but it's like sitting in meetings with them, working out where we want to go. And then probably another 25% with my boss and some of the EC members at Moderna. And then maybe the rest of the time is on ideation and creating materials and getting, partners up and running with new ideas. That's a very basic summary, but probably a little bit off, but close enough.
But a major commitment there for building that team and working with your team, sounds like. By you, Beth.
My interaction with different teams, whether it's, my peers or, my direct reports or, actual program teams, I would say that's on the order of 60 to 70%, of my time. I'm really kind of coaching and enabling, and that time would also include one-on-one, coaching as well. So I'd say that's the most of my time. I'd like to say more like 20% with customers or more. It's probably about 10% right now, and certainly the COVID pandemic has kind of held back the ability to connect with customers as easily as going into hospitals and having those conversations. So that's something I look forward to ramping up more and spending more time externally as well. And then I'd say the rest of the time is more whether it's talking to external technology companies and assessing what's happening, or doing my own technical work or communications is probably another, I don't know if that all adds up to 100% or not, but another 20% of my time.
Now,
but it really varies week to week. It's so 1 week we'll be very focused in one area, and then the next week it's something different.
So I am paying attention to the fact that both of you are very much focusing on relationships as leaders. You really, whether those are external or internal relationships, looks like a lot of your time goes into that. And that also, by the way, as I've been reading these leadership reports, appears to be something that sometimes is credited for women leaders to have maybe the natural tendency to pay a little bit more attention to those relationships. And particularly during COVID, there's a conversation about the empathy that we need to have within our own organizations, because everyone is struggling with a very unique situation. But that can also lead to burnout. So when we are relationship oriented, we spend a lot of time, we have empathy, and sometimes we might take on too much. Have you ever struggled with that in your own role, and being able to balance what you need as a person for yourself?
I'm pretty disciplined about taking care of myself first. And then if I do that, then I've got the energy to be able to give to others. And it can almost be unlimited energy and focus. Sometimes I scare my husband with how focused I can be. But I exercise pretty much every morning. That's my way of kind of centering, both from a physical and kind of mental health perspective. And then, the rest of it is giving the energy to my family and friends and to work. And of course, there are times when that can all get kind of crunched. There are times, traveling internationally when you're kind of flying somewhere new every day that can be a little tiring. And I think just coming back from that and taking a day off or a break, just those mental health, checkpoints are important. But for the most part, I think we need to care for ourselves, and then we can really avoid that burnout.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the working out. It's funny, my husband will say to me, "Did you work out today?" And I'm like, "No." "You're going to work out, right?" It's like, "Wait, why?" He's like, "Because you need to work out." Because it definitely brings me peace. And so you're finding what brings you peace. So that you can actually process everything that's going on is incredibly helpful, so you don't experience the burnout. I mean, I've had times where I've had to work weekends, and I felt like I was cramming for an exam at one point when I was preparing for a big meeting or pitch, and you get exhausted. But to Beth's point, it's if you can't stay on your best game, you can't help others be on their best game. So I agree with you 100%. You keep your mask on.
And you both talked about, actually, as one of the learnings coming from the pandemic for the organization is to stay focused, which also means prioritization. It also means having the energy the energy to really show up at our best and be the best, so to speak. But that can be, of course, difficult sometimes in the middle of everything that comes at us. Do you have any advice for people in your organizations who might be trying to juggle all these different deadlines? Everybody wants to do a good job. Sometimes it's just a little overwhelming. How do you advise those who work in your own organizations to make sense of it?
Yeah, I actually, when I first started, I was talking to a couple of folks who were really, I mean, they had been through a lot. If you think about it, there was a very small team, not a lot of people. And so when I joined, I started hearing some of the frustration that maybe they felt like they weren't delivering. And I said, raise your hand, ask for help, and you will get it. And I think sometimes people think asking for help is a sign of weakness or a sign that you're not delivering. But employers would much rather have somebody raise their hand and say, I need help, than thinking they have to do it all themselves. And then on some of the things, when you're mixing like your personal challenges with your work challenges and how you prioritize and manage, Shelley Lazarus, who was the CEO of Ogilvy and is my role model and mentor and sponsor, she basically said to me once, dust bunnies don't have emotions. Like some things you just, who cares? If the house is dirty for 6 weeks, no one cares. Like you just have to prioritize what really matters in life. And she would always say that to me, like you have to figure out what really matters.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Kate. It is asking for help and also asking people who are people managers to overtly be asking people what they need, because it's a two-way street. So I think for all of us to be reaching out and comfortable and creating that safe space, because I agree with you, we'll provide the help, we'll provide the flexibility. We want all of our talent to be here with us for the long haul, and especially the last 2 years have been very challenging for so many of us. So I think that's really well said.
Generally speaking, do you feel that there is a difference in what the expectation is of men and women, or how women may be accepted as they climb the corporate ladder, if we can call it that?
Well, it's interesting, Tarja, because you bring up something. You mentioned relationships, that women leaders rely on relationships. And I did some training with Charlotte Beers, who is fabulous also, and she was the chairman of Ogilvy. And she took a bunch of senior women through this program where we were told, let's analyze how we get our work done. Not is the quality of the work good, but how we approach the work and how our relationships, like look at our relationships and analyze and assess them, because women really do rely on relationships. And when you think about women asking for things, oftentimes a woman will think that if I ask for this, they might think that, whereas maybe oftentimes, and again, I'm generalizing, but a man won't think about it. He'll just ask. And it's like you're putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, I don't want them to think less of me if I ask this, or I don't want to bother them or whatever. And I bring up an example of 2 interns who joined, and one intern had asked me for coffee, and the other intern, and I had coffee, and he came back and told the other intern that he had coffee with me. And the woman said, how did you get a coffee with Kate? And he said, well, I asked. And she thought I would never just bothered Kate and asked for coffee. I think, this was just a few years ago. So I think some of that still exists we think about how we work with others and don't want to bother them. But I think that might be part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. I in my personal experience, I have, generally worked with primarily men, but I have not felt like I don't have a strong, voice at the table. I've felt supported, and I think, confident in being able to contribute to those teams. I do think there have been rare occasions, where I'm coming in from an outside, perspective, kind of hard to break in. But I don't know if gender could be one element of that, but I think it's also different experiences or, backgrounds. And today, I think being part of diverse teams with diverse backgrounds, it creates that openness an ability to talk about, different ideas. So, I personally haven't sensed that I needed to show up differently and have felt supported. But I think the more diversity and inclusion focus that we have, the more we're going to get out of everybody on who's a part of that team.
So those more formal programs also are still important to have in companies at this point. And I think that both of your companies have a program around diversity and inclusion. And of course, we hope that we wouldn't need those programs, but they still serve a very important role. Is there an piece of advice that you would give specifically to women leaders who have a hope to be able to really move forward with their dream, wherever that will take? What would be the one thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with somebody from another company who's a former client, and I'm sort of her coach, and then she coaches me too. So it's kind of working out really nicely. But I think the one thing that I've been telling her is, realize what you want, like what do you want to do, and let people know what you want to do or what you like to do. And the more people you tell, the more people who are in a position to help you get there, then they can advocate for you and help you. And, if you're curious about other opportunities, don't be afraid to ask. And, and always take the meeting. That's another thing I say is always take the meeting. You may not think you want to leave somewhere or try something new, but take the meeting and you'll see where it goes.
That's well said, Kate. I'd say it starts with your passion and, your strengths and really finding, where you can most utilize your strengths and deploy that passion. And, then having the, I guess, focusing on what you're doing today and being the best at that and really showing great results. And at the same time, kind of reaching out and taking on more responsibility, and showing kind of what you're capable of, and then attracting and enrolling sponsors, because you can do a great job, but if nobody's noticing, I encourage, especially early in career talent, if you have an opportunity to present to a senior leader, just make the most of that. Be prepared, be ready, have a sense of what they may be looking for so you can really shine in that moment. Because I've experienced that as an early in career, that I was able to shine and that attracted sponsors. And I also, when I interact with junior talent and I see that passion and I see that capability, then that makes me want to help them, as well. So I think it's, kind of combination of those three of, pursuing your passion, doing great at what you're doing and kind of pushing yourself to do more, and then, attracting others who can help you get where you want to be.
And that advice in both cases applies to both men and women. It's not gender specific from what I can tell. Excellent. Excellent. So now I do have to ask then, what is your special strength? If you had to describe your own magic power or superpower or special strength, whichever way you want to call it, what would it be?
I guess for me, it would be resilience, that I don't just walk away from something because, we don't think we can do that. I always try and figure out, how do we do it? How do we get there? What else could we do? So I sort of keep coming back, and I think not letting go of something, and also not being beaten down. We could have a bad year, or we could have a difficult situation, but I always sort of say, well, we're not going to let that get us down. Let's figure out how we can solve for it and move on. And, so I think that's probably my superpower.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I would say it's the ability to build trusting relationships. There was once an engineer who, told me, what I liked about you as a leader is you always listened to us and you always told us the truth. And I think that just speaks to, being trustworthy and kind of following through on what you say you're going to do.
I need to ask each of you two last questions. One is personal, one is wider. And I'll let you choose how you answer them. We are coming to the end of the year here and looking forward. It's been a journey, quite an unusual journey for the last 2 years. Your companies have done fantastically. You clearly, as leaders, are in amazing positions. What's your hope, your personal hope, going forward into the next year? And the second question, what is your hope for the world?
Well, my hope from a personal standpoint for the coming year is that I can lead and serve the teams that I oversee to deliver meaningful innovation, just like we have over the last 2 years. And at the same time, be a present and loving, mother, wife, sister, daughter, friend, to the people in my personal life. So having that balance and, caring for others. And I think that's really my hope for the world as well, that we've persevered through a lot of challenges over the last couple of years, and that, we'll continue to care about each other, to help each other live, healthier lives, and doing that in my own personal role, and really just overall that we're helping each other be healthy and fulfilled.
Thank you. Kate?
So my hope is that my family, my friends, my colleagues, basically my hope for the world is that we remain healthy and that people get vaccinated and understand that they need to follow the science. And the other thing is that my hope is that for the next generation, and I'm already seeing it with my own children, that they're more measured in terms of how they approach issues and problems versus where we are now, particularly in the US, where society is so bifurcated, where you're either left or right. So my hope is that we can come together.
Come together healthy, both in spirit as well as in physical health, and give hope to one another. I really appreciate this time with both of you and all the various leadership lessons that you shared. And with this, we will be closing. And I wish you both success as you go forward, as well as success in the efforts of both of your companies. Thank you very much. And thank you also to both of your companies for everything that you do.
Thank you, Tarja. Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. Good to meet you too, Kate.
Thanks, Beth. Same here.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Leaders Agenda podcast. You can continue the conversation with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter by following Action for Results.